Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Analyst's College Football Day-to-Day Show presented by Stats Perform. I'm your host, Mike Leon. We got a monster week upcoming in college football this Saturday. Top 25 matchups all over. A bunch of major conferences. We break it all down with stats and insights from the Analyst and Stats Perform's new tool called PressBox Live. You can head to statsperform.com today to see how PressBox Live is being utilized by college football teams, conferences, broadcasters, and more to help augment their game day coverage on Saturdays. You watch us on video, you listen to this podcast, whatever audio podcast platform you listen to us, please leave us a 5-star review and comment. Pretty please. Come on, I'm asking nicely. Joining me as always to break down this weekend's slate of matchups, the Travis Kelce to my Patrick Mahomes, and I'm a Raiders fan, folks, so you know that I mean that from the heart, is data scientist over at Stats Perform, and he's a college football writer on The Analyst, Evan Boyd. Evan, 4 touchdowns for you, my friend, like Polkai and Al Bundy. How are you?
I was just about to say, just like Al Bundy, 4 touchdowns in one game, not one season or a career, in one game.
That's right.
Yes. Happy Halloween, October, happy spooky season. October we don't really think of as a time where college football is really starting to dive in, and you have a lot of really good matchups, but this is the start of conference play, really good conference play games. And we were starting to see which teams might win their division, which teams might be on the up in the conference. So I'd like to talk about that a lot, especially possibly with the Big 10, with the Big 12. It's going to be really interesting coming down. And this is kind of the moment where we say, all right, what teams really look good? What teams are worth their record right now? I'm quite curious to see how this week plays out.
Yeah, there's a lot of good. This is probably must-see Saturday if we're going to coin it anything. There's so many good matchups. We're going to preview a few of them and give you a surprise game to keep an eye on, and then we'll talk about the Heisman later on in the program. But first, let's dive right into it because there's a bunch of big matchups across the Big 10, the SEC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. Let's start in the Big 10 first that you and I are very comfortable with and know very well. A huge matchup happening up in Ann Arbor as the Penn State Nittany Lions take their 5-0 record, 10th ranked according to the AP and coaches poll, and they head over to take on the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan last week playing Indiana and beating Indiana pretty soundly, scoring a few touchdowns of late to make that game, look a little bit more noticeable on the scoreboard. So 6-0 for the Wolverines, 5-0 for the Penn State Nittany Lions. A bunch of interesting matchups here on both sides of the football. What are you looking forward to in this matchup as the Big 10 East race starts to shape? Maybe after this matchup, who knows? Is it between Michigan and Ohio State, or is Penn State going to be in that driver's seat?
Yeah, I've really talked about Michigan possibly being undefeated into going into the game, but Penn State obviously is going to be one of their biggest challenges up until they play Ohio State. And, I've liked Penn State all year. I've picked them in multiple games this year. We picked them between Auburn a few weeks back, and I said I think Penn State will easily win this one, and they did. I've liked James Franklin's squad when it comes to games on the road. I talked about Auburn, but they also escaped with a win against Purdue at the start of the season. They just find ways to win. And I've been harsher on Michigan this year. I was worried about how they would come out, after a great season last year. I thought they weren't going to be as good, but they're undefeated right now. And, we'll see how good their offense plays against probably their toughest test so far. I even thought Iowa was going to upset Michigan. We realized that wasn't the case. And I don't think Iowa has an offense right now, but that all changes today. I do like Michigan in this one, and I will explain why. Blake Corum has really been the X factor over the past couple of games for Michigan. And I've started to realize that, he might be just as good as we thought. We just didn't realize it because, he's rushed for a touchdown in every game this season. He's second in the FBS with 11 rushing touchdowns. He's rushed for actually exactly 500 rushing yards over his last 3 games. I just looked that up. He's hit the century mark in all 3 of them. And, I thought that they might struggle on the ground after Hassan Haskins left. But the fact of the matter is, last season, Corum averaged more yards per rush, and he almost hit 1,000 yards onto the season. So he's on pace, actually, to have a better season this year than Hassan Haskins last year. So I don't think we talk about that enough. I think we talked about how good Michigan was on the ground last year, but they're almost even better this year. And I think that's going to be a really key factor entering this game because this is going to be their toughest test. Penn State's allowing just under 80 rush yards per game. That's 5th best in the FBS. And, this is a really good, solid Penn State team, like I said before, has just been able to find wins all year. I've also liked what I've seen in JJ McCarthy, though, from Michigan. He had an interception last week in the end zone against Indiana. Fine, whatever. But I do wonder how they're going to play him against Penn State, because he has been a little bit conservative with his passes. He's completing 78% of his passes. That leads the FBS, but he's not averaging that many yards per attempt because he's throwing a lot of short balls. That's fine. That works, but Penn State has picked off the ball 5 times in its last 3 games. So McCarthy will have to be careful, and they might have to test his arm to see if they can go deep for big plays in this game. But I think this would be a test for Penn State mentally, actually, because last season, if you recall, they started 5-0, they finished 7-6, and their 6th game last year was against a number 3 Iowa team that they ended up losing a close one to. So I think something similar might happen here. The question is, how will Penn State handle it going forward? So I do think that Michigan will win this game. I'm curious to see how Penn State will do after this game. But Stats Perform's Tracer, it's our team rating metric. It does project the Wolverines to win without an 80% chance to go 7-0 on the season. So I will take Michigan in this one, in what might be a close one, because Penn State finds ways to win, but I don't think it'll be enough against the Wolverines.
I like the way Penn State has been playing as well this season. When you look at both teams' schedule, Penn State obviously winning at Auburn. They started the year winning at Purdue. Purdue obviously has a big game this weekend to see who will be up top the Big Ten West. I think Penn State's been a little bit more tested. We've seen Michigan in the non-conference kind of run through it and not play anybody of note. Colorado State, Hawaii, and Connecticut are all bad football teams. And the one game where they did get challenged, Maryland at home, they narrowly pulled out. So I like the way that Penn State has been tested, and Clifford as well, being a senior quarterback. 9 touchdowns this year, only 2 interceptions. McCarthy's only thrown 1 interception this year. So both quarterbacks do take care of the football. Again, competition playing a role into that, in my opinion. But I like the Nittany Lions on the road, and it pains me to say.
Okay,
but I think I'm going to take Penn State on the road here. I love Blake Corum. I love what Michigan has done so far, but I just see something in this Penn State team that's a little bit different, and a senior quarterback that I trust with potentially a game-winning drive or a go-ahead game-winning drive. So give me Penn State on the road in that first matchup. Let's head over to a huge matchup that everybody in Knoxville is probably camping out for, as the Alabama Crimson Tide, the number 1 team in the land, rolls into Tennessee. Rivalry week. Tennessee fans, I don't know if they consider it a rivalry, and Alabama fans, vice versa, but it is a rivalry as both teams are undefeated. Tennessee has been doing work this season so far. They went down to Baton Rouge last week and trampled over the LSU Tigers 40-13. Alabama, a night game, pulling out a close home win against the Aggies of Texas A&M. Texas A&M kind of blowing a little bit of the play calling there as of late. If you follow Johnny Manziel's Twitter handle, he'll tell you more on that. What are you looking forward to in this SEC matchup here? As West meets East, Alabama, potentially Bryce Young may not play in the game. We don't know. They looked a little shaky at the quarterback position last week, as Coach Saban had mentioned. A couple fumbles, an interception. What are you looking forward to in this matchup?
Well, everyone thought Alabama and Texas A&M was going to be the game of the year back in August, right? 2 really good programs. It seemed like Texas A&M was on the up and up and the rise. Texas A&M has not played as well as we thought, especially offensively, but the game last week was good. But I think a lot of that had to do with, Bryce Young not playing. However, this game, I think, is going to be what we thought what Alabama, Texas A&M was going to be. This is a tough road game for Alabama, and it's going to be an interesting matchup. Because you mentioned how it's a rivalry, but Tennessee has not beaten Alabama since 2006. The Tide have won 15 consecutive meetings, and the last 6 meetings have not even been close. Those 6 meetings, Alabama won by an average of 32.5 points, and that's just unreal. The games haven't been close, but those teams have not been as good for the Volunteers as it has been this year. So the Volunteers, as you mentioned, they embarrassed LSU last week. They ran all over the Tigers. They put up their 4th game this season with over 200 rush yards, and actually dating back to last season, in 7 of their last 8 games, they've rushed for over 200 yards. That's really impressive. And it's kind of an all-around game, right? It's not necessarily one player. Alabama has also done real well on the ground this year. Both have been good defensively on the run. So in my opinion, the running game is kind of a wash. It might be even a draw, and we'll see who breaks out possibly in this game. Hendon Hooker, though, has been consistent. He's been efficient. I think he could be up there as a possible Heisman candidate. He's had exactly 2 touchdown passes in all 5 games this season. He's yet to throw a pick. And in his last 5 games against ranked opponents, he's gone 4-1. He's thrown 11 touchdowns and only 1 interception. And that pick only came against Georgia last season. We knew how good Georgia was last year defensively, and just overall, I guess. But this game, I think, will really come down to whether Bryce Young can play or not. Nick Saban hopes that the reigning Heisman winner can play in Knoxville. Tennessee's pass defense has also not been that great. In fact, it's been pretty poor, I would say. Among Power 5 schools, only Vanderbilt is allowing more pass yards per game. And even if he's ready to play, though, will he be ready against a top 10 team like Tennessee? We'll see. I'm not really sure. And while Jalen Monroe did do the job for the Tide last week, I don't think it's going to be enough to pull out a win for them. So perhaps the luck will run out here for the Tide. They have had a little luck. They survived against Texas A&M. They survived against Texas back a few weeks ago. And, this one could be gritty. It could be down to a field goal to end it. But I think that the crowd will be thunderous rather than silent at the end. I think Tennessee will win this game. Tracer has Alabama as the 2nd best team in the country, while Tennessee is 6th, but there is a gap between those 2 teams. And Tracer, if these teams played multiple times in a row, everyone's healthy, they would expect Alabama to beat Tennessee by about a touchdown on average. But there's a lot of different factors playing in this game, though. Tennessee's going to be in a frenzy. We have the questionable status on Alabama, who's going to throw the ball. So I'm going to go Tennessee to get the win over Alabama. That's going to send Knoxville just all over the place. There will be parades possibly for this game to win.
The Navy, the Tennessee Navy there will the tailgating scene over there in Knoxville will lose their mind, their collective mind, if they win that game. Hendon Hooker, 1,432 yards passing this year, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Here's a stat and insight presented by PressBox Live. Head to statsperform.com today to see how PressBox Live is utilized by teams, conferences, and broadcasters to augment their game day coverage on Saturdays. The Vols have scored at least 34 points in each of their last 8 games, and they're averaging 48 points per game over that stretch. That's incredible. That is incredible. But again, who have they played in that stretch, right? In terms of conference matchups, non-conference opponents. But you just mentioned it, right? Hendon Hooker hasn't turned over the ball, and he's thrown for 10 touchdowns. And we're going to talk about the Heisman in a little bit. When you're looking for that Heisman moment, maybe this is the game. This is such a tough game to pick, because if Bryce Young is playing in this game and he does, the miraculous stuff that like he did in the Texas game, you think Alabama's going to win this game with no problem, or at least, a comfortably 7 to 10 point margin. If he doesn't play, I don't see how Tennessee loses this game. I do think Alabama's defense is superior, obviously, but I also think that Tennessee has the better team right now, and specifically at the quarterback position. I'm with you. I'm going to give the Volunteers an upset there. Maybe a late field goal or something like that, but it will be a close game. So
I agree.
Yeah, I think it will be a close game.
Mike, I will say this. I think that even if Bryce Young plays, Tennessee can win this game. Okay. Right. If he's fully healthy, even, maybe there's a chance that Tennessee drops this one, but I think that they could still pull it off unless Bryce Young goes absolutely nuts, but I don't think he will. So I think that Tennessee will have the edge here.
Well, let's shift over to the Big 12 because, again, must see Saturday. We don't advocate for staying indoors, but maybe if you go out and watch the games with folks, there's going to be games all across the major conferences. This is a 3:30 tilt between Oklahoma State, the eighth ranked Cowboys. They had the TCU. We saw what TCU did last week. College Game Day was there in Lawrence, Kansas, as TCU pulled out a big road win against ranked Kansas. Not a basketball matchup, folks, an actual college football game. The week prior, TCU steamrolled Oklahoma and the Sooners. They are 5-0 so far in this season. Meanwhile, the Cowboys are 5-0 as well, 1-0 on the road, 4-0 at home. They've beaten Texas Tech. They've won at Baylor. They beat Arizona State earlier on in the year. We know what's happening over there in ASU after letting go of Coach Herm Edwards. What are you looking forward to in this Big 12 matchup? The Big 12 hasn't really been talked about that much. I mean, obviously you got the surprise in Kansas, but Oklahoma's down. Texas is not all the way back yet. Texas Tech has had an up and down season. And the two big dogs right now that are leading the pack are Oklahoma State and TCU. Maybe one of them gets to the college football playoff if they run the table after this game. What are you looking forward to in this matchup?
Well, I'll disagree with you partly, and I do think Texas is actually back. Tracer loves them and think they are. They just lost two really close games. They could easily be 6-0, but that's besides the point. You did mention Oklahoma, and yes, Oklahoma is down this year, and yet last week against Texas, oh my goodness, that was a disaster game. And that game actually, Oklahoma versus Texas, made me realize that maybe TCU isn't as good as we thought they would be because they beat Oklahoma at home, but is that as big of a win as we might expect it to be? I'm not exactly sure yet, but I still like TCU's offense. I think Max Duggan is having a career season. He's had 14 touchdown passes, just one pick, and he could be the face for one of the, a Heisman candidate possibly, but maybe even Big 12 Player of the Year, which would be awesome for him and TCU. He might find a new target to throw to this year in Quentin Johnson, who caught 14 passes for 206 yards against Kansas. And Johnson entered that game with only 114 receiving yards. I like the options that Duggan has a chance to throw to for TCU. And I do think that obviously TCU is going to win ball games. They're going to have to do sort of an air raid offense, relying on their quarterback to give them yards and to score late in the game or even just quick long distance touchdowns. We kind of saw that a little bit against Kansas in a close game. I do question how Spencer Sanders will do. He's just been okay when facing the Big 12. Over his last two games, he's averaged about 6.5 yards per attempt. He's completing only about 57% of his passes. And, Oklahoma State's defense really has not been that good. They come to this game allowing 304 pass yards. That's the sixth most in the FBS. So I think that TCU's air raid offense right now, it's been really good over the past couple of weeks. And I think that Max Duggan is the key to this game. I do like TCU in this game. TCU has about a 65% chance to win this game, according to Tracer. And I think it's going to be a shootout. I think this game could be 52-49 even, because it's going to be touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. If you're used to watching Big Ten football and you see punts, this will be a whole different game for you. But I do like TCU and having their offense really do well against this Oklahoma State defense.
No, you're right. Max Duggan has played so well. 1,300 yards passing on the season, 14 touchdowns, only one interception. What a really good ratio for him. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State, the third best scoring offense in the nation, over 34 points per game. I'm with you. I watched a lot of the TCU Oklahoma game because it was on in the prime, in the primetime 3:30 window across the nation, and they really put it on Oklahoma. Even though Oklahoma is down this year, Oklahoma still has athletes at key positions, especially on the offensive side of the football. TCU was able to hang 55 on them. I like TCU in this matchup. The betting lines, all right, it's a close game. The 3-point, which you normally give to the home team anyway. So obviously Vegas likes it to be a close game. I think it will be a close game. Expect the over to hit by middle of the third quarter for sure. But I like TCU as well in that matchup. In the final game of the big slate of top 25 matchups across conferences, before you and I pick a surprise matchup to watch, is USC and Utah. You and I have mentioned this a couple of times about how well USC Trojan quarterback Caleb Williams has been playing this year. They get set to head to Utah. Utah only has one loss this year, or two losses, excuse me.
Yeah.
But they've played really well in all those games, similar to like Texas, like you were saying. They could easily be 6-0 as well. They lost a close game last week. I forgot about the loss to UCLA Bruins and how UCLA is doing this season. But Utah obviously started the season off at Florida, late interception in that game, which ended up in a loss. USC, 6-0 last week. Washington State coming in, a surprise team a little bit in the Pac-12. A lot of Trojan fans thinking that maybe they'd take them lightly. They didn't. They were able to pull away a little bit late. 30-14, they won that game. USC has kind of run through the Pac-12 slate so far, winning at Oregon State, winning at Arizona State. They haven't really been tested so far. They're 4-0. I mean, unless you count Rice, and I know Fresno State was your group of 5 team to watch, but USC trounced them. So what are you looking forward to in this matchup here? Because Utah is a tough place to play. I don't think USC historically has fared well there. Night game up in Utah, 8 o'clock start there. What are you looking forward to in this Pac-12 matchup?
Yeah, my poor Fresno State Bulldogs. Oh, well. But, whatever.
It happens.
It is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. But, Utah has surprised me this season. I thought the Utes would pick up from where they left off last season. I thought they were tremendous last season, even though they lost the Rose Bowl game. That was obviously to a great Ohio State team, but they were really good down the stretch. And I thought this year they would be a top 10, perhaps a top 5 team in the country. But to me, they still don't have a key win. They lost a close one to Florida, as you mentioned, but I thought they were going to beat UCLA, and they didn't. And that's really kind of turned me off of the Utes. I thought this defense would be the main ingredient for them, but against bigger schools, it has not been. And against Florida and UCLA, they allowed to combine 71 points. In their other 4 games, they allowed to combine 43 points. So it's obviously something going on where they have not been able to handle bigger schools so far. And we'll see if USC, it's a home game, as you mentioned. Maybe USC will have some trouble against Utah. But Caleb Williams is the guy who you're going to rely on in any matchup going ahead. He's a Heisman candidate, and I think he's had an incredible start to the season. Maybe not as good lately as he was at the very start of the season, but he's still been good. Sometimes he's been inconsistent. He went 16 for 36 against Oregon State a few weeks ago, but he still manages to get wins. And Travis Dye has showed no signs of stopping. I loved him when he was at Oregon, and I really do think that he could be a key factor for this offense. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry, and he's seen this Utah defense before. He's had a solid game in last year's conference championship game against the Utes, so I think that he could really turn the tide on this one. I think he's a seasoned veteran right now at this point, but I think this is going to be a real close one. Tracer has this game as a real close one. The Utes have about a 54% chance of winning this game, according to our metric, but from an eye test, I think I like USC in this game. I'm going to go with USC over the Utes, and the Trojans will continue their undefeated season.
I'm with you. I mean, I obviously been on Caleb Williams all year long. We're going to talk about our Heisman picks, or at least players to watch that we think are up there in the Heisman ranking, and he's one of those players to watch. The Trojan defense hasn't played that bad so far this year, but obviously it's been the offense that has gotten so much of the accolades because of how well Williams has been playing, right? And like I mentioned, they're 4-0 in the Pac-12 so far. They won a game at Stanford. They won at Oregon State, holding them to 14 points, holding Washington State to 14 points, Fresno State to 17 points, Rice to 14 points. So the defense hasn't really gotten a lot of the acclaim. I'm with you too. The luster on Utah has kind of fallen off a little bit after that UCLA loss. That would have been a really good win to get them right back into all of this. Now 4-2, but I just don't know. A night game, USC is the better team. Caleb Williams, spoiler alert, he is my Heisman favorite.
Spoiler,
but I like the Utes. I like the Utes in this night game. It is tough winning there. I like Tavion Thomas. I like Utah in this matchup. I think this will be the blip on the USC radar for this season, and they'll win out the rest of the games. Give me the Utes in this game.
Okay.
Give me the Utes, as my cousin Vinny would say. Let's switch real quick. You and I will go real quick on this before we go into our Heisman picks. A matchup to watch this Saturday that's maybe not being talked about. We talked about all the top 25 college football matchups across the conferences. What's a matchup that you got your eye on from a conference?
Yeah, I'm not picking a game that might be that exciting to watch, but I think will have a big factor. And I'm going to go back to the Big Ten here. I think this Illinois versus Minnesota game is intriguing me a lot. Last podcast, I was raving about Minnesota, and then the Gophers stunk it up against Purdue. That was bad, but Tracer still really likes Minnesota overall. And here comes Illinois, who's been tremendous defensively. Brett Bielema has got something going this season, and they have the third best defensive rating, according to Tracer, behind only Alabama and Iowa. Now ranked at 24 in the AP poll. It's the first time the Illini have been ranked in the AP poll since 2011. And they have it all right now. They've shown that they've been tested. They went on the road to beat Wisconsin, and they started off really well. The only blip was against Indiana, which has made me still being like, are they really that good? Are they not? I'm not sure. That was still a close game, but defensively, they are really good. That's why I think this will be a brutal game to watch, kind of like the Iowa-Illinois game this past Saturday. But it will have big implications on who's going to win the Big Ten West. And that's why I'm really looking forward to it, because I think the winner of this game could move on and play in Indianapolis. So we'll see how that one. But if you like punts, watch this game.
Oh, I was watching that Iowa-Illinois game, and the fact that it ended 9-6 made me bash my head against the wall that Rutgers couldn't score more than 13 points against Iowa. And they led up 27, but again, 14 of those points were off of turnovers. That's my own selfish reasons. We'll move off to Scarlet Knights. Yes. Let's get into the matchup that I'm watching, by the way, before we get into our Heisman picks. I'm going to head down. I've mentioned this before of going to a game over there, a night game specifically at the Doak. I like what Florida State has done so far this year. They just lost a heartbreaking game against NC State, not able to score any points in the second half after having a first half lead. They should have won that game. I'm still upset that they lost that game. But now here comes 6-0 Clemson in a game no one's probably looking at or talking about. We know Clemson's focused on it. They're 6-0. They just trounced Boston College in a night game, 31-3 up in Chestnut Hill. Obviously, Clemson earlier this year in a big top 10 matchup beat NC State at home 30-20. They got that big road win at Wake Forest. The ACC has been an interesting, specifically in the Atlantic, it's been an interesting year so far because there's a lot of good football teams within that orbit. And Clemson and what DJ has done at quarterback, he could be a Heisman hopeful. Obviously, 1,400 passing yards on the season, 14 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. If they pull this out, he could have his Heisman moment, like I mentioned before, of ingraining that into people's minds and the voters' minds that are voting on the Heisman. So I'm interested to see what happens in that matchup. We know who I'll be pulling for, but I'm just so interested to see what will happen up there with Clemson and Florida State. That's my matchup to watch on Saturday, 7:30 up there at the Doak. Let's get into our Heisman hopefuls. Quickly for you before we sign off here. Who are you looking at? Maybe you can even give me one person. It could be a couple of people. We know who I'm going to pick, but who's somebody who's your Heisman hopeful so far this point in the season?
Well, before I bring up a name, you and I both agree that CJ Stroud is the heavy favorite right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, Stroud's up there. I think Stroud's up there, but they haven't played anyone yet of note. I mean, they started the year with Notre Dame, and he didn't play that great. And then, everything else has been accumulated against the Toledos, the Rutgers. So I agree.
Wisconsins.
Yeah,
Hello.
the Wisconsins. But that's the thing. Where has been the big time matchup? I think the voters look for that big time matchup that's going to happen. Caleb has an opportunity this Saturday. I think DJ has an opportunity with Florida State. And obviously CJ is going to have his moments coming up when they play Penn State and Michigan. But favorite, I would say no. Top 3, yes, for sure.
Okay, I wouldn't agree with that, but the fact that he's throwing 6 touchdowns against Michigan State is, still amazing. He's been so dang efficient.
Well, they're the worst. That's the worst pass defense in the FBS. So,
but he's still doing it.
I know.
He's still winning. So, but I do agree. Let's see how he does against Michigan in the game. We'll obviously see that. But I will throw out a name that's not CJ Stroud. And I think it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. We've heard about him for a while now. Even if you're not a Pac-12 fan, you probably just know his name because he's been around forever. But the graduate senior is having his best season yet. He's currently having career highs in completion percentage, yards per attempt, and he's had his highest touchdown rate so far this season. And he's at 15 touchdowns and just 2 picks, and he's still getting it done with his feet. He's got 4 rush TDs so far, and he had his best game of his season against Utah, I would say. His past 2 games where they've had, I would say, upset wins against ranked teams, he's probably played his best. He's done it with a little bit of some flair, too, if you notice. He's athletic. He had a rush TD against Washington in which he juked 2 defenders at the goal line and made them crash into each other. It was nasty. It was awesome. So I think I really just like his style of play, and I think he's just really cool overall to watch. And now that, UCLA is undefeated and maybe perhaps a surprise team, but they've still been, really fun to watch, I would say. I would like Dorian Thompson-Robinson as a possible Heisman candidate. Maybe he'll be a top 3 by the end of the season. I don't think anyone expected UCLA to begin the season at 6-0, but DTR is the reason why. Now let's see how he does next week against Oregon. They have a bye week this week because the Bruins, if they pull off a win there, they could be undefeated going into this mid-November game when they play USC, and that would be something. So I really like this UCLA team. I don't think we've talked about them enough, but DTR, he's a seasoned veteran and he's, really cool to watch. He puts up the stats both on the ground and in the air. So I like DTR. I think possibly he could be a top 3 candidate for the Heisman.
I like that. I like that pick. Let's stay with the crosstown rivals. I already mentioned my love for Caleb Williams when he transferred to USC and followed Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. Listen, if you're looking for big matchups, there are no other big matchups on this schedule for USC than Saturday night in Utah. Then they take on, in a few weeks, they take on UCLA, like you mentioned, a top 10 matchup right now between 7 and 11, if everything holds up. And then they finish out with Notre Dame, which obviously is a rivalry matchup. He's going to have 3 opportunities, Caleb Williams, to showcase why he is the Heisman favorite. And potentially, if they win Saturday, we know I already said that the Utes would win, so I'm maybe contradicting myself. I am contradicting myself. But the Utes, right. But you got Caleb Williams, 1,600 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception, 65% passer completion percentage. I just really am enamored with his game and watched him. I don't know how he'll translate to the next level, and we know the history of USC quarterbacks. But for this moment right now, I think that he is in that top 2 conversation, depending upon what happens with the rest of the way. If they win Saturday night, I think that he will probably be in the driver's seat, depending upon how he plays in that game. I gave you another name, DJ Ugalele. Boy, say that name 3 times fast. His parents probably say it 3 times fast all the time. But listen, they have maybe back-to-back matchups here with Florida State, and then they'll have Clemson, they'll have Syracuse, come to Clemson, who is ranked as of this moment, Syracuse is, and they don't really finish out with anybody else. South Carolina's not that great this year. UM has been pretty bad so far under, in the crystal ball there. So those, and Louisville. So those matchups don't really excite anybody. I think Caleb Williams is my one to watch, just based on the matchups and where he is statistically right now and what he does potentially this Saturday against Utah. But DJ is another name to keep an eye on. He's had a really good season so far. They have 2 upcoming games where he'll have an opportunity too. And if they head into, end of November or to the college football playoff undefeated, if they get there, and the ACC championship first and foremost, I think DJ would be a name to watch to make it to New York. So those are my 2 picks there, along with Evan's picks. Thank you always to Evan Boyd. You can check out his work, his college football work, over at theanalyst.com for this show on theanalyst.com, or listen to us wherever you get your podcast, YouTube channel. Type in The Analyst, CFB Day-to-Day will pop right up, and you can watch the program. Thank you again to everybody. We'll see you in a few weeks with College Football Day-to-Day Preview Show. For Evan Boyd, I'm Mike Leon. Take care, everybody.